I'm typing this on a library computer at 4 a.m. because I left my laptop an hour ago and have no plans on going back for it. If you're reading this and looking for a cheap apartment in the Pacific Northwest, avoid the Greystone District at all costs. Don't sign the lease, don't take the keys, and for the love of everything holy, if you see an addendum that reads Midnight Guest Protocol, get the hell out. I thought I was slick. I thought I was snagging the steal of a century. An $800 a month, 2-bedroom loft? I didn't care that the property manager, a twitchy woman who I'll refer to as Mrs. G, refused to make eye contact when she thrust the pen at me, nor when she said the plumbing gargled at night. I signed my name, I took the keys, and then she handed me the welcome kit. It wasn't fruit, it was a toolbox containing 3 rolls of industrial gaffer tape, a pile of thick blackout curtains, and a single sheet of paper with bold, capitalized, bizarre instructions. The rules are non-negotiable, she warned me. Eviction is the least of your worries if you disobey them. I laughed in her face. I'm not laughing now. I'm a junior architect, which is a fancy way of saying I work insane hours for poverty wages. I needed to be within walking distance of the firm, and these lofts seemed perfect. The floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick and industrial chic, looked like the interior of a high-end design magazine. During the showing, all the windows were covered with the thickest drapes I'd ever seen, and even the bathroom mirror, a giant antique bolted to the wall, was shrouded in a black sheet. Mrs. G explained it away as the previous tenant being a light-sensitive hypochondriac, but when it came to signing the lease, she flipped to page 14. Clause 7, she whispered. The Midnight Guest Protocol. It read as follows. Tenant agrees that between 2:14 a.m. and 4:44 a.m., all reflective surfaces in the unit must be covered. This includes, but is not limited to, mirrors, windows, televisions, and unpolished metallic surfaces. Failure to comply shall be construed as an invitation. Management is not liable for any physical or psychological distress incurred due to an invitation. I asked her if this was a joke. If the building was haunted, Mrs. G did not laugh. She just tapped the paper with a chipped nail. This is a term of occupancy. The reduced rent accounts for the inconvenience. Do you want the apartment or not? I was broke and desperate. I signed the lease. I assumed I'd play along with their stupid superstition for a few months, save some money, and get the hell out. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in contract law and cheap rent. The first night I moved my stuff in, I was thoroughly embarrassed but did my rounds covering the reflective surfaces. I set an alarm on my phone for 1:50 a.m., got around the apartment and pulled down all the curtains, threw a towel over the bathroom mirror and spun the computer monitor around. It felt like a toddler playing hide and seek. The first week was incredibly uneventful. A bit boring, really. I would do my rounds and then drift off to sleep to the muffled sound of traffic. The walls are very thick, concrete and brick. So once the curtains are drawn, you're in your own sealed off little world. But about midway through the second week, things started to shift, though I can't really explain how I know. It was this intense feeling, the kind where you feel the prickles on your neck when someone's staring at you, just 100 times worse. Around 3 a.m. one night, I got thirsty, the kind of half awake, stumbling to the kitchen to get a glass of water thirsty. I'd skipped turning on the light, navigating by the ambient streetlight filtering through the crack between the drapes and the window. I grabbed a clean glass off the dish rack and turned on the tap. When I raised the glass to my lips, I froze. My microwave, I'd completely forgotten the door. It was black, glass, and shiny, a perfect mirror of the dark kitchen behind me. Except it wasn't. In the reflection in the microwave was a figure. Tall and incredibly thin, it was wrapped in what looked like damp bandages, and the angle of its head seemed impossible. Its skull nearly resting on its shoulder. It was looking at me. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest, waiting to be attacked. There was no one in the kitchen. I looked back at the microwave. The only reflection was of my dark, empty kitchen. I chalked it up to sleep paralysis, a hallucination induced by stress and suggestion. Immediately, I taped a sheet of cardboard over the microwave door. I cleaned up the glass with shaking hands, slicing my finger open, and didn't sleep again that night. Since then, I went militant. Not just draping the mirrors, I gaff taped them. I taped over the shiny chrome on my toaster. I taped over the glass front of my oven. I even put a matte screen cover over my laptop and my phone, and I still shut it down and buried it under my pillow way before 2:14 a.m. I started doing research by going to the city archives. The lofts were a textile factory back in the 1920s that caught fire in 1928. 12 people died in a room lined with mirrors. Then I looked into the tenants before me. They didn't just move out. I found a police report for the apartment, 3 doors down, domestic disturbance call. They found the tenant screaming in the bathroom, clawing at the mirror, saying, "It's not me. That's not me in there." I should have left then. I should have paid the lease break fee and slept in my car. But humans are stubborn creatures. I told myself I had this under control. I had a system. As long as I stuck to the rules, the midnight guest could not enter. The lease stated that an uncovered reflective surface was an invitation. If I did not invite it, it could not enter. It had rules. But I forgot one detail. The most dangerous reflective surface is not a mirror or a window. Tonight I had a deadline on a huge stadium rendering for work. I was running on caffeine and sheer anxiety. I stayed up late and the time hit 2 a.m. I saved the project, shut down the computer, and did my rounds. Big mirror covered. Checked the windows, checked the appliances. Felt safe. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, leaving the hall light off and a dim night light on so that the chrome of the faucet wouldn't unexpectedly flash and startle me into catching my reflection. I spat in the sink, watching the water swirl down the drain, but then the water stopped draining. The water gathered in the white porcelain bowl of the sink. It rose, dark and still. And there it was, a perfectly circular, reflective surface. I stared down at it. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I saw my own face in the reflection of the still water, but the reflection was wrong. My reflection was not looking down into the sink. It was looking straight ahead at me and smiling. It wasn't a human smile. It stretched way too far. The eyes in the reflection were entirely black, not the normal black with a white dot of a pupil, just an abyss where an eye should be. I tried to step away. I tried to scream, but I was frozen. The guest wasn't behind me this time. It was in the reflection, and it was rising. The water in the sink began to ripple, not from the drain, but from the center, as though something were pushing up from below. My reflection's hands began to emerge, not down into the sink, but up out of the water. Icy cold fingers gripped my throat. They felt solid, like iron. They felt so cold against my skin. I could feel the chill penetrate my shirt, smelling faintly of stagnant rot and copper. I was pulled downward. My face was only inches from the surface of the water, as those two black holes in the reflection of my own face fixed on mine, and a voice resonated not in the room but in my own skull. "Thank you." I thrashed, kicked. My arm flailed and knocked over the heavy porcelain toilet tank lid. Without thought, I swung, smashing the toilet tank lid down onto the sink. The ceramic cracked and the sink broke apart, water spraying everywhere, drenching my legs. The reflection shattered into 1,000 glittering wet pieces. The grip around my throat released immediately. I tumbled onto the tile floor, gasping for air, coughing, silence. The water drained away into the cracked porcelain below where the pipe had burst. I crawled backward, crab-like, out of the bathroom and slammed the door shut. I didn't stop, grabbing my wallet, and bolted out the apartment door, leaving it wide open behind me. I ran down 6 flights of stairs because I couldn't bear the idea of stepping into the mirrored elevator. Out on the street, it was pouring with rain. I stood on the sidewalk, my clothes soaked through to the bone. And it was then I realized what I had really done wrong. I looked down at a puddle on the sidewalk. No reflection. I looked in a shop window. Nothing. Checked the side view mirror of a parked car. Empty. I don't cast a reflection anymore. Well, not one that I can see anyway. But in the corner of my eye, I see something. The midnight guest. Walking where I'm walking. A split second behind. Getting closer to the surface with each moment. Whatever it was that crawled out of that sink, I don't think it was just me. And the thing that's tailing me, I think it's just waiting for me to stare at a mirror long enough so it can fully emerge. So I'm warning you. If you want to rent a loft in Greystone, don't sign if you see that clause. And if you're reading this on your phone right now, please, don't keep staring when the screen goes black. I live alone in a small town, the kind of place where you can leave your door unlocked. That's what everyone says, at least. I don't know most of my neighbors personally, as I spend most of my days at work and my nights alone. I did meet most of them my first week moving in. They all came to say hi and to welcome me to the neighborhood. They informed me about all the HOA rules and asked me to join the neighborhood watch, to which I agreed because I didn't have anything better to do with my time. The neighborhood watch deal is simple. I usually come home from work, eat something for dinner, and go do my patrol. I just walk around with a flashlight in my hand and pepper spray in my pocket. After my uneventful stroll, I come home and turn on the cameras, glancing at them occasionally while I watch TV. I lived peacefully, and everything seemed right in the world. Except one thing, one problem that I couldn't explain. My shower drain was getting clogged all the time, like once or twice a week. It started off as a minor annoyance, eventually turning into a big one because the last thing I want to do is stick my fingers into a slimy, deep dark hole when I just want to take a warm shower after work. I'm ashamed to say how long it took me to notice, but the hair clogging my drain wasn't mine. My hair is short and brown. The hair in my drain, however, was long and blonde. I didn't know what to do, so I called the cops. There's nothing we can do. Great. They told me that there's no signs of a break-in, nothing on the outside cameras, and since I didn't have any indoor ones at the time, there was no evidence of anyone but me being in my home. The day after I got my paycheck, I went on Temu and bought some cutting-edge 5G Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4K motion detector, indoor cameras. I know, but it was the best I could afford at the time. Despite their name, they didn't have any motion detecting capabilities. So if I wanted to know what happened during the day, I'd have to watch all of it. I tried multiple times, but I never really did. Don't blame me. It's a lot of footage. Then I got another idea. I waited for my drain to clog again. Then I called the police and asked them to check the DNA from the hair. Nothing. Again. They left, and I, in my anger, proceeded to punch a hole in the wall. I didn't have money to fix it at the time, so I just hung my old Eminem poster I found in my drawer. I liked him and the color scheme fit my living room. I hated the hole. It made all the usual house noises even louder. The creaks and sounds of the house settling, rats scurrying around. It was right behind me as well. But it made me start going to sleep earlier, so I guess it was a positive change after all. Over time, the hair started getting darker and darker. First, it was platinum blonde, almost white, then dirty blonde, then red, ginger. After that, a sort of auburn later, a deep mahogany, eventually turning into a dark chocolate brown, just like mine. I also got a written warning from the HOA. Miss Gallagher came to deliver it herself. It asked me to make my partner stop walking around naked during the day. I still lived alone at the time. It also told me to start treating my dog better, otherwise animal control would be called and he would be taken away. It mentioned loud crying and scratching sounds coming from the door. I didn't have a dog either. At this point, I wanted nothing more than to move out. I couldn't. I didn't have enough money. I couldn't go to my parents. I had a couple of friends, but they weren't the sleepover kind. I thought about buying a tent and going to live out by the river in the forest. I decided against it, considering the heavy rainfall and freezing cold nights. After finding my clippers out, laying on the sink, and my closet trashed, I called my boss to tell him I couldn't come to work the next day. I made some coffee and sat down to watch all my camera footage. They didn't have sound and the quality wasn't great. I put it on 2x speed and tried to focus. The angles weren't great, but I had a good view on the front door, a shit view on the back door, and an okay view on the bathroom door. Yay for Goldilocks. I watched, patiently might I add, but I couldn't really focus. The whole sound seemed louder today. I thought that it was nothing, that I was just freaking out because of everything that happened. That's when I saw him coming out of the bathroom. He was a little taller than me, quite pale and somewhat thin. Thinner than me, but not fully skin and bone. He picked up a framed photo of me from the hallway table. It were me and my friend at the time. We took winter walk in the forest, carved our names into a tree. He looked at it for a minute or two. It was 5. He stared at the photo for 5 minutes. Then he went into my bedroom. A few minutes later, he came out wearing my clothes, his long brown hair tucked into my winter jacket. He took the picture and went back into the bathroom. He cut his hair, I think. I couldn't see it after he came out. He then went into the kitchen. He dug around in the drawers. I noticed his hands were particularly frail, long, thin fingers with claw-like nails. He took my pocket knife and put it in his pocket. He walked to the front door. From the back, I could see his neck was bruised. He tried to open the door. He couldn't. So he got on his knees and started scratching at it. He did this for a few minutes. Then he wandered around the house. Afterwards, he went back to the door. He did this about 5 times. His 5th time wandering around, he noticed the Eminem poster. He stared at it, and then he ripped it off the wall. I looked from the dining table at the spot where the poster was. That's when I saw it. An eye. A gray eye staring at me from the hole in the wall. In a flash, I reached for my pepper spray, ran up to the hole in the wall, and sprayed him right in the eye. He yelped like a dog, quick, loud, and confused. I yanked my jacket off the wall and ran out. I wanted to call the cops. Maybe this time they could help, I thought. In my rush, I left my phone on the dinner table. I ran over to Miss Gallagher's house. I banged on her door. "It's me, Mark. I'm your neighbor." Loud yelps and bark coming from my house. I could hear the sound of drywall breaking. He was angry. He was gonna come out after me. I kept banging on the door, ringing the doorbell. When I saw him come out of my front door, I decided to kick in Miss Gallagher's door. 1 kick, 2 kicks on the 3rd one, the door gave in. I saw Miss Gallagher sleeping soundly on the sofa. I threw her dresser in front of her door and got on the landline.
What's the emergency?
I told them there's an armed man in front of my house and gave them Miss Gallagher's address. The lady on the phone told me to stay on the line and to keep a lookout. The police will be there shortly. I hate how calm the dispatchers sound. "It's me, Mark. I'm your neighbor." I froze. He sounded just like me. He banged on the door, tried to kick it in. Then he stopped, started scratching and crying like a dog, then banging and crying like a woman. I noticed Miss Gallagher's back door was open. It was one of those glass sliding ones. I ran up to close to. He had the same idea, as by the time I got there, our eyes met again. It felt like looking in a mirror. I held the door back as hard as I could. He started banging on it. Bang, bang, bang. Pounding on it. He kicked it. First kick, nothing. Second kick, the door gave. Glass cutting through his bare feet and my jeans. He didn't expect the glass to break this quick, so he lost his balance and fell on the floor. I kicked him in the head. He yelped again. I ran out and grabbed Miss Gallagher's hoe. He got up and walked outside. As he did, he cut his face on the broken glass door. He pulled my knife out of his pocket and unfolded it. I ran up and smacked him across the head with the hoe. As the sound of sirens filled the air, he dropped my knife and ran out toward the forest on all fours. Miss Gallagher was dead, her throat slit, presumably while she was asleep. The police thought it was me at first. Obviously, I had the knife and she was dead, and the call about the armed man came from her house. Thankfully, it didn't delete the footage, and I convinced them to watch it. The interrogation wasn't fun, even though I knew I was innocent. They couldn't find anything else, no trace of it. They did find a hole leading into the wall behind my bathroom mirror. I got placed into the UK PPS and moved halfway across the country. I'm married now. I don't want to be alone. I still have nightmares about that time, hearing myself, seeing myself, killing myself. I have other one too. Last night I was about 1 meter tall and blocking the door, the thing towering over me. Every night I prayed to never see it again. Anyway, I'm writing to try and get this off my chest. My therapist said it could help. We're planning to move to France once we save up enough. Wish me luck. This all happened when I was 13. Things weren't great at home, and I drifted into the habit of going out very late most nights and just walking aimlessly around, exploring the pretty dull town in which I grew up. My parents went to bed early since they had actual responsibilities, so it was pretty easy to say I was going to watch TV at a friend's house and stay out till the small hours, creeping into bed well after midnight. There was a girl in my classes called Janet, who I didn't think had ever even noticed me previously. She was stunningly attractive and witty and warm and generally perfect, and I was very much invisible to girls, invisible to most people in fact. Don't ask me how this came about, as I am unsure myself, but we began to meet up on some of these nocturnal excursions, though we were never more than friends. I guess she must have been a fellow night owl, or maybe she was just bored like I was. I had no idea how to talk to girls, but I must have done something right, as somehow she seemed to like me. Though I am hardly what you would call a ladies' man, I sure as hell liked her. We got into a routine whereby she'd slip me a note in school with something scribbled like, meet me by the shop at 9 o'clock, and we'd hang around in the dark and talk about dumb things. It was the sort of town where everything shut down at night, and so we had the roads, parks, and cemetery to ourselves. She'd show me the house she grew up in, and I'd tell her about some local ghosts and legends that I'd half invented myself. We'd usually gravitate towards our school, which is surrounded now by a 7-foot chain link fence like a concentration camp. But in those days, anyone could wander around the paths and grounds, with a big playing field and forest at the rear. There were benches and bike sheds if we needed to rest or shelter. We were still just about young enough to have a good time without cigarettes and alcohol. So one night we had arranged to meet as normal, and I stood over the road from the corner shop that was the only place in town still open so late, sort of watching from the shadows as sometimes one of the staff would see me and storm outside to tell me to get lost. But Janet never showed, which was the first time. I gave her another hour and left pretty hurt and angry, which in hindsight was an overreaction. In all probability, she'd wanted to come meet me, but maybe her parents had stopped her, or something had come up. Neither of us could afford a mobile phone, which were still for the rich kids back then. I couldn't really hang around waiting any longer anyway, as it was October, and cold enough so that even an indestructible teen like me could feel the chill. I wandered aimlessly until about midnight, when I wound up sat on an old bench overlooking our school, at the top of some long, gradual steps which led down to one of several entrances to the sprawling school structures. I was miserable and dejected and could see my own breath, for like an idiot, I was always underdressed for the cold British weather, with only a thin sports jacket over a t-shirt. I was one of those kids who never needed much of a shove to sulk and strop, so I sat and shivered and felt sorry for myself. Thoughts flashed through my head of suicide or self-harm, until I noticed there was a light on at the bottom of the steps, which, strangely, I hadn't noticed earlier. The dim light shone through a small window in a door which led into the school science block. This was bizarre. No one should have been inside the school at this hour. I sometimes stayed late with a detention, and even a couple of hours after the students left for the day, there were no cleaners or teachers left around. The place was eerily deserted and as quiet as the grave. I decided to go and have a closer look. I don't think I would have done if I wasn't in such a lousy mood. I guess I figured that the evening could not get any worse. So I made my way down the steps to the pale yellow glow, which seemed comforting, like a sanctuary from everything wrong with the world. My curiosity was off the scale too. Maybe there's something exciting like a robbery in progress, or some older kids who broke in looking for someplace warm to get high. The door to the school wasn't locked, and I saw the light was coming from another door leading to a room beneath some stairs, which I hadn't ever really noticed before. I cautiously entered into a nurse's station of sorts, a small room with a couple of old, battered school chairs, and a mirror on the walk over a sink. It was stiflingly warm inside, though I saw no radiator and heard no heater. There were a couple of ancient yellowing posters on the walls about not passing on flu germs or something similar. Just before I announced my presence, a lady appeared in a small alcove and asked how she could help. I told her I had seen the light and followed my feet. I realized my thoughts of death and dismemberment were draining and felt too foolish to tell her of such things. She had a manner about her which screamed that the only love she gave was of the tough variety. So I said I wasn't sure what I wanted and politely inquired about her presence. She told me she was always there at night as a crisis nurse, without going into specifics, and I was too shy to ask any more questions. It was a small town, and the school also acted as kind of a community center too, serving as a voting station and blood donation center, that sort of thing. So to my naive 1-3-year-old mind, her story sort of checked out. She was tiny, literally 4 feet tall, and dressed like someone from the Salvation Army, with a khaki shirt and shorts, old-fashioned sandals, and a dark crimson sash around her stocky chest. I never once saw her smile, but didn't really see this as strange or unfriendly until I thought about it later. Also reflecting on how her language was cold for a nurse. They always call you love or dear, ask nice friendly questions, and seem to want to talk, enjoy it even. Her attitude was formal and businesslike. There was an awkward silence before she suggested that I must have known why I had arrived there, so I said that I guessed I lacked direction, which was a stupid thing to say, but it seemed appropriate somehow. She said she was part of a team who people could turn to when they felt alone or undervalued. Showing no emotion, she began to speak of pills which might help. I mumbled some vague agreement, a little bewildered as I knew nothing really of medication back then, and she disappeared back around the corner from where she had first emerged. I could hear cupboards and drawers opening and tablets rattling in plastic jars. She told me she had just the thing to make me feel better, and spoke of doses and such like. But while she was talking in her low, soft, and slightly gravelly voice, I began to pay attention to my growing sense of dread. It dawned on me that I did not like this woman at all. Something was very wrong with the entire situation. Worse, I sensed that I was in real danger there, and that I had to leave immediately. So while she was still in the back, rummaging and muttering, I slipped straight out the door and hurried home to bed, not looking back once. I have no more memories of that night. When I awoke, the whole thing seemed unreal, with my recollection rapidly disintegrating, details vague, like in my dreams. I probably would have dismissed the whole thing as some bad nightmare if it were not for the breaking news at school that morning. Janet had vanished in the night. She had gone out to meet someone and never returned. Everyone was talking about it. The speculation was predictably ridiculous, a smorgasbord of half-baked theories and vindictive gossip. They held an emergency assembly for everyone in our year, with a police officer stood on the stage urging us to come forward if we knew or heard of anything, even vaguely strange or suspicious. Afterwards, officers spoke privately to some of Janet's closest friends. She had quite a few. She was always very well liked. Of course, they didn't bother speaking to me, as no one had a clue about our late-night rendezvous. In fact, no one even knew I existed. I did wonder if anyone would have even believed me if I had come forward to say that I'd been meeting with Janet. I probably would have been dismissed as an attention seeker, or maybe they'd have seen me as the prime suspect. Weird, shambling misanthrope meets popular pretty girl. The thought did cross my mind, and how could I have told anybody about what had happened to me that very same night? They'd have pegged me as insane and thrown me to the wolves one way or another. Strangely enough, Janet was very rarely mentioned by anyone again afterwards. No anniversaries were marked. Her close friends quickly began to talk about other things. A couple of weeks, and things were back to normal, except about a year later, one of our teachers took down some old posters, and beneath one was a bright scribble in permanent marker pen about Janet, some stupid insult. The teacher froze for a few moments, then remarked quietly on how she couldn't remember Janet's surname. Then she dismissed the whole thing and carried on with her day. I turned around to look back at the rest of the class, but no one else was even listening. That was the last time I heard anyone say her name. She has seemingly ceased to exist, which is strange to say the least. The police seem to drop the case pretty soon, and an internet search throws up no record of her at all. I have no way of knowing if she got mixed up with the weird old woman I encountered that night, but the whole thing seems too bizarre to be coincidental. But for all I know, Janet ran away to join the circus. It is maddeningly vague. I did discreetly ask if the school ran some sort of late-night therapy service for troubled teens, but you can probably guess the answer. I really should have gone and said something to Janet's parents, as I consider myself at least partly responsible for her disappearance. But I was far too immature and awkward to ever have confronted them. What a total wimp. And that is the end of the story. The end of Janet, I guess. I've since moved to a new town, but sometimes I return to revisit the places where me and Janet would go to on those few fleeting late summer nights. The school is still there. It's been pretty heavily redeveloped in recent years. Every part seems totally different except for those long, gradual steps down to the old science block. I walk past every once in a while, and I stand above those steps and stare down at the school, and I still wonder what the hell happened.